Hi, I'm Mike Kissinger, and I'm here at the War Memorial Building, and I'm here to do another presentation that is helpful for veterans who have different types of issues as far as improving their lives, looking at things that they need to do, whether it's finding a job, changing their issues as far as PTSD, maybe being a business owner, and looking at what really happens to you. There's a lot of information in the marketplace on things that you can do to change your life, and the issue always is, does it work? One of the things we're going to talk about today is The Secret, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read the book, maybe listen to the film. It's been put out by The Secret. But there's a lot of things that people believe and they don't believe. You know, and if you was to search the history of mankind for as long as this information has been around, what you would find out is that back in the olden days, back in the days when I was around, back there about 75 million years ago, you start looking at the Chaldeans, you look at the Babylonians, you look at the Romans, you look at the Egyptians. Every human race and every human population has always had an understanding that there was something unique about what was happening. There was something unique as to why the rich were the rich, or why the poor was the poor. And as time went on, you know, even during the times of the Bible, if you sat down and you started looking at Genesis, and you look at what was really taking place in the beginning of Genesis, what you find out is that over thousands of years, people have wanted to know about the secret. About 4 years ago, the book, The Secret, was published, and the Secret itself focused on the law of attraction. Now, the law of attraction, you know, there's all kinds of different comments, there's all sorts of different feelings that people have, whether or not that particular law applies. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the law of attraction, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. And we're going to do it differently in the context that you understand how you function as a human. There are things that we'll talk about today that you don't necessarily understand because no one has ever really sat down and explained this process to you. So with this article that I was reading, it says that Oprah lives by it. Millions are reading it. The latest self-help sensation claims that we can change our lives by our thinking. So the question for you that you have to decide, is this something that you can do? If you change your thoughts, can you really change your outcome? Most people don't understand that by trying to change their thoughts, they can in fact change their outcome. And since we're talking about The Secret today and the law of attraction, let's see what it says. The Secret is a law of attraction, which holds that you can create your own reality through your thoughts. So the question for you is, do you believe that? If you think about what you do in the morning, you think about what you do at night, are you producing the thoughts that you have in your mind, or are you producing something else? Chances are you're producing whatever you think about. If you go back to the days of Napoleon Hill, what did he say? 1928, he said thoughts are things. If you go back to the year 2000, or whatever it is, 1910, what do you find out? Wallace D. Wattles said, whatever you think about, you get. If you look at the history of America, when America was originally created, what did the founding fathers believe? Why did they put on money? In God we trust. Looking at what's happening there, we all know that there is some kind of power, there's some sort of thing that happens to us that sooner or later we get a vision of it. We feel that there's something else out there, that if we would only take hold of it, we could change our lives. So what we're basically saying in The Secret is that by changing your thoughts, you can feel better about your situation. Or you can view it as a source of inspiration, that by believing you will succeed, you will in fact succeed. What did Henry Ford say? Whatever you believe, that's the result that you're going to get. Or what did Napoleon Hill say? Whatever the mind can believe, it can achieve. So looking at The Secret is basically saying the same thing. You know, there's comments by different people, and you start looking at when The Secret actually came into America. Phineas Quimbley, back in the 1850s, was a person who was a doctor. And he started believing that there was a relationship between the mind and the body. And that if the mind was able to be healthy, the body would in fact be healthy. So what he says was, my cures are in my belief or wisdom that a patient's disease is his belief in the knowledge of what his body is doing. So if you want to be healthy and you believe that you're going to be a healthy person, since your mind controls your body, at least that's the philosophy behind The Secret, you're in fact going to be a healthy person. If you believe you're going to be a poor person, you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to be a poor person. And why is that? Because when you look at what happens to your mind and your mind controls your body and the activities that you're going to participate in. So if you believe that you're going to be poor, you're going to have thoughts of poverty, and as a result, that's what you're going to produce. And Neil Kuhl, in the early 20th century, developed and popularized a bit of information that was based on autosuggestion. And what he was basically saying was, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. Now that sounds pretty good if you start telling yourself over and over and over, I'm getting better and better. But the reality is, will you get better and better? And the answer may be no. And the answer may be no, because when you look at what you're really looking for, you're looking for an answer that allows you to take control of your mind, take control of your circumstances, and interrelate with the universe that you live in, so you can in fact make the change. So just by saying over and over, you're going to get better, that might not do it for you. Charles Fillmore, who was the founder of Unity School in Kansas City, in 1889, he wrote The 12 Powers in Man. And what that was really to describe to you from a biblical perspective what powers that you really had as a human. And you know, you read the Bible. Some people read the Bible, some people believe it, some people don't. Some people understand what the Bible's really telling you. And if the Bible is a book of life that tells you that the laws of the universe are within its pages, and that if you live by those principles, you can accomplish what you want, you need to understand that you do have powers. And some of those powers may be that you have the same co-creative power as God. That doesn't mean that you are God. It means that by the manner in which you think, if you understand your thought process and you as a human, you have similar co-creative powers because you live in a very creative universe as opposed to a competitive one. We also have Deepak Chopra. A lot of people have read his books. He's written 40 books. He's known worldwide. And what he says is we need a more spiritual approach to success and affluence, which is the abundant flow of all good things to you. And so what he looks at is the law of attraction, and he looks at different success laws and technologies that are available to you once you open your mind to realize that they're there. Norman Vincent Peale, who was around the 1950s, he published a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. You know, we hear a lot of things today, you know, if you think positively, everything is going to be good. But what happens to you? There's a phrase that says your attitude determines your altitude. What is the altitude that you're reaching today? If you look at what happens with the Blue Angels, you look at top military units, it's always determined by your attitude. The higher you're going to go in life is always set up by the altitude, or by the attitude that you have for that altitude. A lot of us have heard of Tony Robbins. He's been a consultant to presidents. He's on television all the time. He wrote Personal Power. And he was trying to describe to you through the process of neuro-linguistic programming that if you would use or learn what those techniques were, you could in fact change your life. Then you have Wayne Dyer, who wrote The Erroneous Zones. You know, and you have a lot of things that are in the marketplace that are trying to get your attention. You know, and you're trying to find out what's the best way. What is the way that we can do this so we understand what's happening? So when The Secret came out, what they were telling you was basically this. You are like a human transmission tower, transmitting frequency with your thoughts. If you want to change anything in your life, you need to change the frequency of your thoughts. Well, how do you do that? You know, people are sitting there saying, well, I read the book, I got the memo, I've seen the movie, I've done all these other things. How do I really get to change that process? Well, that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. It goes on to say that starting with something small, like a cup of coffee or a parking space, it's easy to find it if when you get there, if you say, I'm having a cup of coffee. Or you say, the parking space is going to be there. But over and over and over again, you hear that people use these techniques, and they actually get the coffee or the parking space. Another thing it says is that make it your intention to look at everything that you can and say to yourself, I can make it happen. You look at world-class athletes, what do you think they do? You look at golfers, especially golfers. What do they have to do first in order to be able to even take a shot? What they do first is to visualize the stroke that they're going to go through, the ball going through the air, and actually going to the place that they have targeted. You look at Tiger Woods, since everybody likes to pick on Tiger nowadays, and what's happened to him? He had those powers and he became the best in the world. But the reality is, with the powers of using natural laws of the universe to make your life better, if you violate the law, it's very difficult to get the power back. If you look at O.J. Simpson, when he was a kid, he couldn't walk, he couldn't run. But yet he met one of the football players, and he said, hey, I'm going to break all of your football records. And what did he do? He did. But what happened when he went outside of using those universal laws or biblical principles? Where did his life go? And this is one of the things that happens to you. When you start learning the laws and you start finding out that you live in a creative world as opposed to a competitive world, you realize that you cannot make that change or transfer as easily as you want to without suffering the consequences. The Secret goes on to say that disease is held in the body by thought, by observation of illness, and by the attention given to illness. If you feel a little unwell, don't talk about it. Don't even think about it. If you look at your body and you're saying, my mind controls my body to create it to become whatever it needs to be, and to stay as healthy as it needs to be, to the elimination of all illnesses, what happens to your body? Now, I know since I've gotten out of service, I've never been to a hospital. I might have a cold periodically, but if I focus on eliminating it with my thoughts, what happens is my body is fine. When my son was attacked by a gang in 2003, I went through the same principles with him. And we played them over and over and over again because he was in a coma for months. What most people don't understand is even though you're in a coma, your mind does not shut down. And since you are still hearing things, and if you play different types of CDs, or you listen to different types of movies, or you think about laughter and how it impacts you, what you'll find out is that you were able to heal. So when he was injured, they said he's never going to walk again. They said he's never going to recover. He's going to be in a wheelchair. He's going to have this issue or that issue. And what happened was we were actually able to take him from that point, 7 or 8 years later, to a point where he's 95% recovered. And what did he recover from? A traumatic brain injury. He recovered from a stroke. He recovered from his inability to walk. He recovered in high school. He was able to graduate from high school because he was only 14 at the time he was injured. He had a B average. So you look at these types of principles, you say, well, will they work? Well, it depends. It depends on whether or not you believe what it is you've been taught. If you look at the Bible, for instance, and the Bible tells you, whatever you believe, that's the result that you're going to get. That's what happens. So, if you want to focus on negative thoughts, that's something that you can choose to do. And if you start asking yourself, why is life so negative for me? You may find out it's really the thoughts that you're generating for yourself. Going a little bit further here, you can say, this is something that, is hocus pocus, this is something that really doesn't work. But let me ask you a question. Do you know who Henry Ford is? Henry Ford obviously created Ford Motor Corporation. But Henry Ford was well known back in the day as the person who applied these principles. What about William Wrigley? We buy spearmint gum. But he was also another person that used the principles to change what was happening in his life and his environment. What about John Wanamaker? He was known as the Merchant Prince. He created the world's first department store and did quite well. And why did he do that? If you think about that, what do you have to do to go through the process, to use your thoughts to manifest what these guys have done? Next thing is, what about James J. Hill? He was known as the Empire Builder. And what he did is he created Great Northern Railroad in order to join the East Coast and the West Coast. And how did that thought process come to his mind? When you start looking and you listen to all the things that are out there that people tell you, the person that runs the company is the person that has the greatest vision. Well, where does the vision come from if it's not in your thoughts? Where does the vision for the house? Let's say you're going to build a house. And you decide, I'm going to build this really nice place. Where does the vision come from? Does it come from the architect? Does it come from you because you see exactly what you want? Does it go on a piece of paper that's actually drawn out for a contractor to do it? You start looking at these things and you're saying, well, what are the thoughts that are there? What about George S. Parker? He was a teacher and he got tired of fixing pens for his students in class. So what did he do? He started the Parker Company. And needless to say, that became a world-renowned company that does all sorts of things. What about George Eastman? Everybody knows what Eastman Kodak was. So if you look at Eastman Kodak and the guy says, well, hey, I want to take instead of having people go and have photographs taken, I want to have them taken today here by you. What did he have to think about in order to create that? Did he have to look at the camera and say, how can I make it a little better? Most people don't know. It took him 20 years, at least, to get a little Kodak camera. So looking at some of these things, You know, presidents. Would you believe that the presidents of the United States have used this idea, that they have basically gone from the competitive plane to the creative plane? One of the greatest presidents in the world was Abraham Lincoln. And if you read some of the things that he's written, you find out that he's also talking about the law of mind and what you can do with it. Not so much about the law of attraction, because there's a lot of universal laws. He talks about the law of mind. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States, has consistently written when he was alive and talked about these types of principles. How about Wilbur Wright? What gave him the idea that if he played around with it long enough, that he could create an airplane and that it would fly? You know, so you look at where you are in your life and you're saying, well, will the secret work? Well, the secret is a whole lot more than just looking at one single law. It's a thing of looking at yourself and looking at, if we look at this little diagram over here, it's a thing of understanding that as you live here today, you might think, oh, you only live on one plane, and that's a physical plane. But the reality is that you live in a spiritual universe. You are a spirit living within a body. You have complete control over everything that happens here. And why would you believe that? If you believe the Bible, it says God gave you complete dominion and control over the heaven and the earth. So how did you get that complete control if it was not through your ability to think? You also live on an intellectual plane that gives you ideas on how you can function in this environment. So with these ideas, what do you think about? Think about poverty. Think about a great night at Saturday night, taking your hot rod down the street and going to a drive-in movie when they used to have them. Do you think about robbing a bank? Do you think about what kind of relationship you're going to have with your kids or whatever? This is the intellectual world that you live in. And then you finally get down into the physical world. This physical world is an exact mirror of what it is that you think. So if you look at this thinking process and you say, okay, well, what's wrong with my life? Is there something that I can do to change this? Absolutely. Then you got to start looking at yourself. If you know that you live in a spiritual world, if that's what you are, that you have developed ideas through your intellectual powers, and you produce results in your physical world, what's happening to you? Well, what's happening to you, there is a power that runs through your body each and every day. It's been running through your life, whether you know about it or not. That power is what goes into your conscious mind. So what I normally end up doing, and I learned this from Bob Proctor, was that if you start looking at the stick person, you say, okay, this top circle is really your mind. So if you ask somebody, what does your mind look like? They can't answer it. They can tell you what your head looks like, they can tell you what your brain looks like, but they have never really tried to understand what your mind looks like. So by having a diagram, what you really have is you have a big circle, which the top part of the circle before you look at the line is really your conscious mind. And your conscious mind brings all your thoughts. It's what you think about every day. It's what you learn. When you go to school, it's like when you first come into the world, you hear all these different things as you're a kid, and then over time, you learn how to walk, you learn how to talk, you learn how to relate. All these things become intellectual things, and they go into your conscious mind. Then you start acting in a certain way. And why do you act that way? Well, you act that way. There's a universal law called the law of averages. Before you get here, you're already conditioned and programmed. And with that law of averages, what happens is you start acting because your parents act that way. You act that way because your kids act that way. You act that way because your friends act that way. And those thoughts that you take from your conscious mind, you instill them into your subconscious mind. So what we're really looking at is a universal law called the law of mind in action. When you get to the subconscious mind, that thought, that idea, those habits have to go somewhere. This lower circle is your body. Because your body is going to do something. It's going to move in the morning, it's going to stop at night, it's going to be tired, it's going to be totally energetic and whatever. But why is your body functioning that way? And the reason it's functioning that way is because your mind is controlling your body. So if you think of your mind as a source that is plugged into this power that runs down through and to it, you start realizing that you have unlimited power because that's what God gave you. So you look at your mind and say, okay, and your body, you say, okay, what's the body all about? Well, the body, under the law of vibration, everything is vibrating because you live in a sea of energy. So the power comes into your mind, comes down to your subconscious mind. Through the law of vibration, it causes you to start vibrating. Once you start vibrating, because of your habits, because of what you're thinking about, you start producing certain types of activities. Those activities can be either good or bad. They can be either for you or against you. They're based on how you were conditioned in order to live your life. Now, once those activities take place, then you start getting the results. So what are the results that you're getting in your life? Are those good results? Are they bad results? Are they things that you want? Chances are, at least for, if you look at what's happening in the American economy today, if you got 46 million people that are in poverty, if you got 49 million people that don't have insurance, if you look at 1 in 6 being broke, if you look at what's happening with small businesses across America, and 60% of them are either breaking even or going broke, what's happening to you? What's happening to most people is they don't really understand who they are and the powers that they have. If you realize that the power, all the time, you listen to what people tell you, what preachers tell you, what you hear in church on Sundays, that you have these powers within. You have this higher power, and if you could only communicate with that higher power, you could manifest whatever you wanted. Wouldn't that be something you'd want to spend a little time learning? Because if that higher power is going to produce the results that you're going to get, what happens to you is that you now are living in an environment because you've changed from the competitive world into the creative world, and you start taking care of yourself. So let me say it this way. You are a perfect instrument for spirit to express itself through you. Some of us believe that God expresses everything that happens in our life because it runs from this power down through and to you. So how do you do that? Well, there's a law called the law of visualization, and what happens is you can't do anything unless you can see it in your mind first. So if you wanted a pretty woman as a girlfriend, if you wanted to drive a real hot car, if you wanted to end up living in a different type of house, how often do you see it in your mind? Chances are, once you start learning what these universal laws are all about, then you start picturing those things in your mind. And then as you go to your subconscious mind, there's a law of subconscious mind, and that's really the law of your life. And what that law basically suggests to you is whatever you think consciously that you implant in your subconscious mind, you are now going to get that result because these are the way universal laws work. So it works to and through you. So let's talk about your conscious mind. We've talked about the stick person a little bit, and we basically let you know how you as a human function in this environment. You can believe me, it's good. You don't have to believe me. But if you go through the history of the Bible, you go through all the books that you're going to read as far as personal development, this is something that they're trying to get you to understand. The idea of the stick person was created by Dr. Thurman Fleet of San Antonio, Texas in 1934. There are all sorts of people, once they start understanding what that stick person is all about, they start realizing that they as individuals have control over the things that they can do. But until they start looking at this stick person and finding out that this power was given to them, they tend to shy away from those things. Now, I can get into the conscious mind and the subconscious mind of the body a little more thoroughly, but will that help you right now? Chances are I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time going through what this is all about. The thing to remember is, we watch the news all the time. We listen to the radio. We listen to the music that we don't like that some of our kids listen to. And what does that do to you? If you're looking at how your mind functions, you can either do something inductively or deductively. From an inductive point of view, things come to you, and you listen to negative things, and that's what you start implanting in your subconscious mind. On the other hand, if you take control over your thought powers and the powers that are available to you, you totally change the outcome that you're going through. Now, I think we covered that pretty simplistically, because this is some pretty deep stuff once you start getting into it, and it takes a while to learn it. I spent 25 years learning it, and it's helped me out a great deal, like I said. And as a veteran who is involved in the process, who wants to know how to change their lives and get the things out of life that they want, it's something you might want to pursue. You see, there's 3 certain steps that you need for prosperity or for getting what you want. The first one is to build an image in your mind of exactly what you want. Now, you can do that in all kinds of multiple different ways. You can take photographs of it, you can take things out of magazines, you can go visit car dealerships or whatever. but it will come to you. The next thing to do is to turn it over to your spirit, which your spirit is really your subconscious mind. And because your subconscious mind is controlled by the law of subconscious mind, it will manifest that in your life. The next thing you do is to apply the law of expectancy. Now, a lot of people pray for things, and they say, well, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, but nothing happened. And why is that? Well, there's a law of expectancy, which is also a natural universal law, and you get exactly what you expect. So if you're praying and you're thinking that the person you're praying for is going to die, what do? They die. If you think that you're going to not get a disease and you're praying that you don't get it, and you're thinking you are going to get it, what happens to you? You get it. So what I can say there is that if you're trying to accomplish something in your life that's important to you, you want to spend a little time learning what some of the laws are in order to accomplish those things. And as you do it, you'll find out that what I'm telling you is true. In closing with what I'm going to say today, what I'd like to say is that, what you need to start looking at, if you want to improve your life and make it better, as a veteran or as a small business owner or whoever you are, you want to start breaking the laws, start understanding what the laws are. There's certain natural laws of the universe. There's certain laws that pertain to your relationship with God and you. There's laws of prosperity. If you read Catherine Ponder's books on the dynamic laws of prosperity, you'd find out that there's about 23 different rules that apply that way. If you start looking at what happens with laws of success, let's say you want to be a successful person, and you spend some time, either us talking with you or sitting down with you, or you go into a bookstore or whatever, you find out that there's 15 laws for success. Once you understand how these laws work and interact with each other, then you can become very successful. There's also certain types of laws, 12 laws for the laws of achievement. So when you look at the different types of laws and you look at the things that happens in your life, you realize that you are controlled because you're a spirit living within a body. And that situation is controlled by natural laws. Once you understand the natural laws, whatever it is you choose to do, they will happen for you. So I always tell my girlfriend, my wife, it works like this. There are no rules. What she says is, there is one hell of a lot of laws. And the reality is once you understand how those laws work with each other, then you realize there really aren't any rules. There's what you make up in order to have those things accomplished for you. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. I hope this was a little bit helpful for you as far as understanding what you can do and what you can't do, as far as your life and things that you might want to consider, especially if you're a U.S. military veteran or if you are a business owner who wants to hire one. So have a great day.